Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. Bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good up boys from Africa, you know we love the Big C tribe. We love them in Canada, but Big C, there's no one we love more than you good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful June 27, 2018. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we were loving the World Cup until we realized it was something that you couldn't drink out of. You know, we thought that everybody was going to be buying moonshine and pouring it in the cup and pass around. We found out it was something that grows sitting on top of a couple of hands. I mean, you tried pouring yourself a drink and everything just fell down on the ground.
Could you imagine how many germs you get from the World Cup, Big C? That's kind of a good reason you good boys didn't get to sip from the World Cup, especially a lot of people don't wash their teeth or wash their mouths or even wash their hands. Is that why you never get sick, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you drink moonshine, there's nothing that can live in it. You know, I've had bugs fall in it in an open container, and all of a sudden you see them floating in the bottom. You've heard that story about the worm in the tequila?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
We got all the gnats and flies in the moonshine.
You know, funny, it's not even a funny story. I know growing up sometimes, there were times that we would try to deal with people that were, you know, dealing with whatever liquid diet they chose to have. And back in the day, a lot of older people never really went to the doctors to get fed all of the pills we take nowadays. But a lot of older people that I knew to live into the 90s, they drank a lot of hard liquor, some moonshine, and they ate a lot of food out of the ground. And so I know a lot of that. You good boys, you guys are big on that down south, Big C. Your thoughts on natural foods and liquor, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, food out of the ground is even food that's walking on the ground.
Yeah, same thing.
So, I mean, if you don't move fast enough, there's things that can invite him to the house to dinner. And, you know, we've always had our gardens and everything, Charlton.
Yeah.
It's great to go out and pick something fresh. You know, this time of the year, the peaches are just luscious on the trees. Charlton, we got some plums coming up and, you know, just a whole gang of fruit, nectarines. And it's nothing like, Charlton, walking out in the morning, going out in the back of the house and pulling a couple of pieces of fruit off the tree, Charlton, and you bite into them and the juice runs out. And I don't know if many of you city folks understand that. Is that when you bite into something and the juice is running down your arms because it's right.
Oh, okay.
It's not hard. You're not walking through the grocery store squeezing on it to see if there's any pliability to it. As you're pulling it off, your fingerprints are going into it, Charlton, because it just hangs tree. But, you know, it's one of the greatest things that we get a chance to enjoy, and it's amazing that many more Americans don't get their fulfilling of fruits and vegetables every day. You know, we look at our society and wonder why we're so unhealthy.
Yeah.
We've become I need it now society, and that's even in food, Charlton.
Yeah.
When you look at the number of fast food restaurants that spring up and got the drive-through window, people don't even get out of their car to get the exercise to go and ketchup and everything else on the front of the clothes.
I understand.
So, you know, but, you know, even athletes, you know, they take athletes and have them promote these fast food restaurants, Charlton, to get mainstream to gravitate to them.
Yeah.
That just shows you the pull and power of the professional athlete. I mean, we see LeBron on the Sprite commercial. We know that too much soda is not good for anybody.
Diabetes, yeah.
And so, but they use these athletes, these high-profile athletes, to endorse it. I mean, we've seen them all on these fast food commercials. Matter of fact, even McDonald's have something now with your friend Charles Barkley and Gabrielle Union.
Yeah.
You know, promoting these hamburgers. And I don't know if anybody's ever been to McDonald's, but that damn hamburger don't look like what I see on the commercial.
No, it doesn't.
You know, because I walked in there and said, can I get the hamburger they had on the commercial?
Yes.
And they brought me something over there that looked like it was lost.
Lost in space, huh?
And I'm like, hold it, wait a minute, I'm not paying for this.
That's why I like the one in Eddie Murphy's movie Coming to America. I think it's called
McDowell's.
McDowell's really put it down when he had the hamburger. I do want to say, speaking of put it down, this segment is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. You know, we just talked about last month, you know, what is your monument? We have these national monuments, whether it's Yellowstone, whether it's Yosemite National Park. We have the Roman Colosseum, the Egyptian pyramids. They're all monuments, Big C. But when you think about the monuments, some of the biggest monuments of the universe, we lost one today. And the late Joe Jackson lived to be 89 years old. The father of Michael Jackson, you know, the Jackson 5. You think about what he's done. His seed, Big C, he must have been eating vibranium, Big C, because his seed has produced Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson. How many people can say they produced 2 children that performed in the Super Bowl? Not only that, they were one of the first original families to ever appear on mainstream television. The Jackson 5, I know back there in the day with Dick Clark on ABC. I think it was, he had that Rockin' Eve show. American Bandstand. And when you look at the hottest performer on any genre of music in the history of the universe, it has to be the late Michael Jackson. Talk about the seed that came out of Joe Jackson's loins, as Jackie Gleason back in the day told his son, and there's no way you could have come from our loins. Well, the loins of
Smokey and the Bandit.
I knew you'd know it, Big C. I think you were in that movie too, Big C. But just talk about Jackson and what he's left to not only dominate music, but just to dominate the minds of Americans and people all over the world. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you're talking back to an era where parenting was, you know, paragon of virtue in America.
Yeah.
Where family structure was what it's all about. We see so many single families now, Charlton, single parent families in America that don't have the structure that the Jacksons had, you know, coming from, you know, Motown.
Yeah.
You know, well, Indiana,
Gary, Indiana.
Where they were from, they're right next to Gary, Indiana.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you think about a father's involvement in his children's life, Charlton, molding them, help sculpturing them,
yeah,
to be successful in life. And you think about all of Joe's children, you know, not just the boys.
Yeah.
3 girls also, Rebe, Janet, and LaToya.
Yeah.
But, you know, he had 8 children, Charlton, actually 9 children that really aspired for greatness. And when you talk about Janet and Michael being the only 2 family members to ever headline different Super Bowls, Charlton, at halftime.
Yeah.
You know, brother and sister doing it. Not only that, Charlton, to be top, you know, chart-topping artists, Charlton.
Yeah.
Also performing in movies, Charlton.
Yeah.
They crossed the genre of mainstream going into the big screen and the music industry. But when you look at what Joe Jackson did as far as bringing these kids along, I mean, there was a lot of influences in their lives, and Joe was able to get these kids in front of them. Smokey Robinson was one of them. James Brown was one of them, Charlton. And that's who Michael really modeled himself behind, was Smokey Robinson and James Brown.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, from my perspective, when I look at the success of the Jackson 5 in those early years, Charlton, is that they sang adult songs.
Yeah.
We look at a lot of the young artists in the 80s and 90s, they call them bubblegum artists.
Yeah.
And they were singing, you know, little girl songs, little kid songs. When you go back and, you know, think about the song When I Met You by Michael Jackson,
yeah,
well, the Jackson 5, you know, it was just a kid singing a grown man song.
Yeah.
And that was the appeal that adults fell in love with the Jackson 5 with, because they were modeled after Smokey Robinson. They were modeled after the Temptations, the Four Tops, a Marvin Gaye, a Stevie Wonder. They were in that genre, Charlton, of music that people appreciated. And Joe Jackson made sure he steered his children right.
Yeah.
And they sang the right type of songs. You know, they made sure that the songs fit the persona of the Jackson 5. And even later on, when Michael moved away from the group, Charlton, what Michael learned as part of being a part of that family unit with his brothers carried on even in his single artist performance, Charlton, and even Janet, as we saw her, grow up and mature and become this dominant female artist in America and around the world.
Yeah.
But this all came from Joe and Catherine Jackson, his wife that, he leaves behind. And, Catherine, it was right there with Joe every step of the way with the boys and girls, Charlton, making sure that their career took the right path, that they didn't get taken advantage of, that didn't have a Don King in their lives, telling them what he could do for them because they were doing it for themselves. But when you talk about the success of an American family, the Jackson Five, Charlton, just the Jacksons as a whole, would personify that. When you look at the success that a family can have across the table from top to bottom, from the oldest to the youngest, Charlton, the Jackson Five are an iconic part of African-American history.
You think about that, very well said. I love your knowledge of the Jackson Five and the Jackson family and all the siblings. And I look at how the Jacksons, they grew up in Jim Crow, Gary, Indiana. They made Motown as well known as any other group that came out of Motown. And for a lot of young actors and performers and musicians, Michael Jackson did it all. The one thing I really miss is that he never performed with the late Prince. That, to me, was something that the whole world missed because they were just too excellent with the craft, the top of the craft. But some of the songs that I think about from Michael Jackson that came out of Joe's loins, I Want to Be Where You Are, I'll Be There, Off the Wall, Beat It, I'm Bad. But also, when I was a little boy, I know you don't rats coming around that moonshine, Big C, but he had a song, they called it a mice, it's called Ben. And he had that song about Ben, and it made you feel like it's okay to have a rat, as a toy, Big C. I'm glad that...
Well, we got some big cats that run around in the yard, so I don't know if mice are very welcome around here. If they are, the cats love them.
Yeah.
But I don't see them around here often.
Yeah, I think, you see... They call a rat a mice when they wanted to be a house pet. They call it a rat when it's a eye. They all the same, Big C. It's the same. But Michael Jackson, when he sang that song called Ben, I think a lot it made a lot of young people think it's okay to be accepting of everything. I really want to bring up something that Michael Jackson did that's really missing, especially when I watched the BET Awards just the other night over the weekend. And I know I come from a different genre. Nobody has to be like the old school because everybody's different. But what I think the world is missing is when the Jackson 5 performed, it was almost like a movie. There was one he did with so many athletes. I know Magic Johnson was in one of his movies too. And I just
remember the time when Eddie Murphy, Iman,
all of them. Yep. The great actors. Michael Jackson crossed over into movies. He produced his own stuff, wrote his own music. He was a great performer. He was doing it as a little boy. And every time he came on stage, people may talk about his suits, but he was also theater. He had that showtime.
Well, he and Diana Ross, Charlton, did The Wiz. He was in Broadway.
Yeah.
And they turned it into a movie, The Wiz, one of the first Black Broadway shows, Charlton, and became, the black version of The Wizard of Oz. I mean, he crossed over with everybody, and he looked at Diana Ross as his iconic model.
Yes.
As far as his mentor, he was mentored by her as much as anybody. Looked at her as a mother figure, as well as a great entertainer as part of the Supremes. And then even when Diana went out on her own, Michael followed her.
Yeah. Now, you have so much knowledge of that genre of music, Big C, but there were so many people that, people can always criticize. We're all human. But there are some people who said that Joe Jackson did not allow his children to be children. And I disagree with that because the antithesis of that, look at so many kids in the African-American community, especially Motown, that have so much more to overcome than if they're focused on trying to be excellent at something. And I think it's Malcolm Gladwell that talked about being excellent when you do 10,000 hours of anything. It makes you excellent. Well, they must have done, all of them combined, 100,000 hours of performing. And just think about all the music he produced, Big C. There's to be 10 times that left that he never went public with, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you could not produce all of the music that they had down on script. No one could. You know, it's like you spoke about the late Prince when he passed away. You know, they say he had between 2,000 and 3,000 songs that he had written that had never been produced. He just had the sheet music for him, Charlton.
Yeah.
And when you think about the Jacksons, Charlton, whether it was the Jackson 5 or Michael or any of the sisters, Charlton, as far as what they put out there, that is part of the fabric of America, regardless of the culture.
Yeah.
There's not many Americans that do not know at least one Michael Jackson song, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, they might want to say, well, I don't know anything that he sings. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You listened to it. You heard what he did. Just like with Prince, you heard what he did. And to me, my favorite, there's two. There's the Earth song, you know, that everybody's, What About Us?
Yeah.
You know, that's the song.
Yeah.
And You Rock My World that he did with Chris Tucker from Rush Hour with Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
One of the greatest videos that you want to see. Marlon Brando's in there, Charlton. You know, people wanted to be with Michael Jackson when he entertained. When you look at his video, it was almost like, please, Michael.
Yeah.
Let me be on your video. And he was a senator of Joe.
Yeah.
It is that, Michael, we want to be in any aspect of your life that you can. You know, I remember a story that Magic was telling one time, Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, he was at Michael's house, and, you know, he was thinking that Michael was all this fake eater and everything, and so, you know, Michael had a chef.
Yeah.
And so Magic was asked what would he like for dinner, and Magic felt, you know, well, I'll just eat healthy.
You're right.
and so, you know, he said, well, I'll have some breasted chicken on the grill, you know. And
yeah.
Michael said, okay, not a problem. So, you know, he had the chef whip it up. And so, you know, along with the side dishes, then he said he'd sit down and eat. You know, there is Magic with his chicken breast off the grill. Michael sitting there eating a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. You know, and Magic said, he said he felt embarrassed. He said, here it is, I'm trying to eat healthy because Michael is so thin.
Yeah.
And Michael's sitting there eating what I wanted to eat, a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
That's so funny. You think about exercise and cardiovascular work, that brother performed all the time, and I doubt if he had high blood pressure eating a whole bucket of KFC, but I think something too that I really miss is some wait until people are gone before we recognize their work, Big C. But with the Jackson 5 and the father, an African-American father, imagine how many times growing up in Jim Crow, we talk about how we're 10 times more likely than kids to be expelled from school by white teachers. You can Google that. That's in California, a progressive state. We're not talking about down south. And then with the criminal justice system, 7 times more likely to be falsely accused than Caucasian. That's why I think what Oscar Robertson said at the NBA Awards, we asked everybody to help. It was Jewish Americans that started the NAACP in 1909. The Jacksons embodied that. The reason I say they embodied that is when you look at Michael Jackson's videos, not only when he performed at the Super Bowl, or Janet Jackson performing at the Super Bowl, his whole dance crew was diverse. I remember when he did the moonwalk back in, I think it was 1983. He did the backward, he was dancing back, they called it the moonwalk. And he had brought the whole world there. I remember playing ball back in the day. There were a lot of college kids that were Caucasian men and Samoans and Asian and Hispanic. They knew more about Michael Jackson than they did about Dr. King. And Dr. King marched for civil rights. But it's because Michael Jackson reached out and he brought other people along to perform with him. There was, I want to say, I think it was Van Halen in Beat It. And when he had Van Halen, I might be saying it wrong, but I think it was
Van... He was the guitar. Eddie Van Halen was the guitarist.
Yeah, he brought the whole diaspora of human beings together. He was a forward thinker. He was ahead of the times. And I want to get your thoughts on what it meant to you good old boys down south when you saw black men and white men from different musical genres performing on stage as if they were brothers the way God meant us to be. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's always been that way, on the back rooms playing. Maybe not in the mainstream at times, but when you look at music doesn't know a race.
No.
When you listen to music on the radio, a lot of times you would think that an artist was white, they were black, and vice versa, Charlton.
Yeah.
People understand what lyrics and chords mean, Charlton. When they're playing the chords to a song, Charlton, it's something that resonates within you as a person. That's why when we think about jazz music in America, Charlton, which culturally comes from African Americans, that's where it was created. But everybody utilizes jazz in their music, whether it's a jazz guitar, whether it's a saxophone or trumpet, Charlton. When you think about some of the greatest artists of all time, they sit around in the juke joints, Charlton, for years. They would go to Harlem, especially in New York, and even in Chicago, the big cities. They would go to the black side of town. A white artist could go into one of these clubs, sit down and listen. But a black artist couldn't go vice versa into a white club. So the white artists were always going in, taking the music and taking it and saying, okay, I can label this because I can get to the label and the black artists can't.
Rick Berry and Elvis Presley.
Many of these artists, Charlton, over the decades, lost their music because someone would go take samples of what they did and make their song. But when there was segregation in them, you couldn't fight it. You couldn't take someone to court and say, that's my music that he stole. I have it right here.
Yes.
Because who was going to believe the black artist, Charlton?
Yeah.
That's how much we've grown over the time that you look at it now. And just about every bit of music you hear on the radio, Charlton, has some type of black influence. Even on the country charts, there are many black entertainers, Charlton, on the country charts. So it's not a bit of music that they're not touching. I mean, we look at rock and roll. Lenny Kravitz, one of the greatest guitarists out there.
Yes.
It just resonates in the rock scene.
I tell you what, Big C, when I think about what's happening in today's society, whether it's Trump and Maxine Waters, I know that Joe Jackson had the chance. He showed the world, when you're raising African-American kids, how to be fair and how to not let anything stop you, how to get mainstream to finally embrace you. And I just think, what would he say in today's climate when his kids were encouraged to bring all people together? Different religions, different faiths, genders. And we wonder, what's the solution to bring our society together? We know sports will connect our society as well as anything, but music will connect the world even more so. I just want to get your thoughts on what Joe Jackson's thoughts were in keeping his kids safe from not being a statistic that a lot of people would have been easy to become a statistic, especially growing up Old Town. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, because you said earlier, so many people said he didn't let his kids be kids. He did. They were kids doing something that they enjoyed. You're going to tell me that none of those kids enjoyed the spotlight that they gained?
Oh, my goodness.
They did all the things that other kids did when they were their age, Charlton, but they did more. That's what a lot of people don't understand. That if your kids are doing more than what the average kid are doing, you can't say they're not allowed to be kids. These kids had the foresight to understand what their father was teaching them, Charlton. That's why Father's Day is so important.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you have a father that's around that's teaching you how to be a good person, how to be a good citizen, how to grow into a productive adult, Charlton, that's Father's Day every day.
Yes.
And so when you look what Joe Jackson, the father, took the time to do with his young sons, Charlton, to put them together, to orchestrate, to get them around the right people, Charlton, to propel their careers. That's what it does. You think about Joe Jackson, regardless, there's no father that's perfect. Every father has some negativity in him somewhere.
Yeah.
When you can put your children on the right path and you can look back and you find out that your children are the iconic family of music in America and they're black, that's a pretty good father.
I think that's very well said, and obviously he and the mother. And I think what touches me about the Jackson, as a young boy growing up, In fact, when I was a young guy, when I remember one of my first songs was actually by Elvis Presley. And then it was Johnny Cash. It was called She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain When She Comes. I remember that, singing it over and over again as a little boy, because that's what mainstream radio and TV gave you access to. And then here come the Jackson 5 as he really started to break out onto the scene. And I, so grateful that we had the late Dick Clark, because Dick Clark actually advocated for a lot of those people of color to even have access to it. But before there was a Dick Clark that made that possible, there was Joe Jackson, and there was Katherine Jackson, and they did raise a wonderful family, and they had some great musicians and entertainers in that family. And I know people talk about how great somebody is, and it takes parenting, and it takes a village to raise a child, but I hope that the young diaspora of Americans can, all colors, can look at what he did with his own children. Imagine, as you mentioned earlier, if all of us could rise to that type of success, doing what you want to do from day one for the rest of your life, and then expanding that. That's what they did, and that's because their father aimed them in the right direction. He wasn't behind bars trying to visit his kids on visiting days for an hour or whatever time they give you. He wasn't one of those fathers that had his kids being expelled from school, even though they grew up in a society that always was looking to accuse African American boys of everything under the sun. We know that, but I know he may not get enough credit as the patriarch of that family. They just call him the late Jackson, Joe Jackson. But as a patriarch, what can other fathers learn and mothers learn from Katherine on how to steer your kids in the right direction, even though you may not be as successful as they may become? Big C, your thoughts?
Charlton, parents of that era, that the Jackson patriarchs, Joe and Katherine, all did the same thing during that era, Charlton. They were just normal black parents at that time in America in the 50s and in the early 60s. This is how it was, Charlton. You had two parents in the household. They talked about education. They talked about doing the right things. These kids also, Charlton, had a church background. They just didn't sing in the basement. They sang in church to start off.
Yeah.
So they were part of choirs. So when you sit there and say, what can you give to other parents? Parents of that era all did the same thing. My parents did the same thing just as the Jacksons did, Charlton.
Yeah.
They steered you right. There wasn't things to do wrong unless you just wanted to be bad, Charlton.
Yeah.
We didn't have the internet that you have now. We didn't have social media. We didn't have cell phones. Matter of fact, we didn't even have a phone for a while. Had to go down to the neighbor's house.
That was a cell phone. Go to your neighbor's.
When I was that's how it was, Charlton. I don't think we got a phone until I was maybe 9 years old or so. That's when we got our first phone.
Yeah.
So you think about that, Charlton. Everybody didn't have the deflections that you see now. There was not things that distracted you. You had to stay focused. As a kid, we read.
Yeah.
The Jacksons did that. This is what your parents did. They bought you a comic book. You read that comic book till pages started coming apart, Charles.
I still remember that.
You learn to pick up other magazines, Life magazine, Look magazine.
Yeah.
Sears and Roebuck and J.C. and Montgomery Ward's catalog. We didn't look at those for the articles, though, Charlton. They had some lingerie sections in them.
Oh, okay.
This is well before Victoria's Secret.
Okay.
All little boys went through this.
I understand.
But, parents put things in front of you to influence you, to let you understand what you needed to accomplish in life. Joe Jackson, Katherine Jackson, Charlton was just like any other black parent in the 50s and 60s in America. Their whole focus was to make sure that their children were educated and successful.
Yeah.
And they did a great job of it.
Well, I think just the world lost, someone who could be considered like father of the century when it comes to raising children. And I want to bring up this point too, that the Jackson 5, whenever you have that kind of money, people come after you, especially being African American. And when I even look at what happened with Janet Jackson, how she's even made her renaissance, when in the Super Bowl, someone pulled her top off.
Justin Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake pulled her top off at a Super Bowl, and the mainstream media blamed her. And I want to ask everyone in the universe listening to this. Now, Justin Timberlake never suffered for that. And Donald Trump talked about that same behavior, grabbing by the vagina. Never suffered from that either. But when Justin Timberlake did what he did, Janet Jackson got the blame, and I ached for her for that happening to her, because I challenge anyone on any mainstream TV program, take your news anchor that happens to be Caucasian female, have a black man stand next to her, and pull her bra off for the whole world to see. Big C, which one would get fired?
Well, Charlton, I think it might be the minority guy. And when you look at that, how America backlash on Janet Jackson, like she was the only person on stage, and she was standing there with her hands in the air when it happened at the time when Justin Timberlake took the time to grab, the top of her outfit and expose her breast.
Yeah.
But you think about that, she's never recovered from that, as far as having an opportunity to go back and atone at another Super Bowl.
I agree.
This past Super Bowl, Justin Timberlake was a halftime show.
Yep.
And so it was acceptable to have him back, because they're saying he did nothing wrong because he only exposed her breast. She shouldn't have had a breast, basically, as far as mainstream is concerned.
No.
Is that she should have had it removed so that once he removed her top, that nothing would have showed. And so that just shows how America is, Charlton, how divisive that it is. That when a man does something to a woman, he's not the bad person. It's the woman.
Yeah.
And I'll take this back to an incident that occurred last summer, that a judge made a statement in a rape case about a young lady, said she should have kept her legs closed, maybe it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, that's horrible.
This was a judge, an elected official that should have been thrown out of office, not even a recall, should have just been, terminated at that point by the county that he was in, and the state should have been disbarred from making a statement like that.
Yeah.
This is the same type of treatment Janet Jackson got. She's standing there performing, and the Caucasian male removes her top.
Yeah.
And all you heard for the next year was Janet Jackson exposing her breast. They said Janet Jackson exposed herself. Janet Jackson exposed herself. Everybody was Janet Jackson exposed herself. Nobody said Justin Timberlake pulled her top loose.
Yeah.
That was never said. It was always Janet Jackson exposed herself.
And you can...
Everyone saw Justin Timberlake make the move, but Janet Jackson kept getting blamed because she was the minority in that situation, Charlton.
Yeah.
I look at this. If it had been Madonna at the time, Charlton, on the stage performing, and you had a prominent African-American entertainer, R. Kelly, we know how he is.
Oh, yeah.
And he had pulled her top.
Yeah.
What would have been the backlash?
Yeah.
It would have been against R. Kelly. Wouldn't have been Madonna.
Well,
it would have been R. Kelly.
It would have been R. Kelly. And so I even credit Joe Jackson for the way that Janet even responded to that, because the average person, if that happened to anyone, we would be really up in arms about it. But they took the high road, and sometimes it's do that. If you can imagine someone doing that to your daughter at school, somebody walks up and exposes their bosom in front of the whole class, and then people blame her for having that happen. So I think the way they handled life was because of their parenting, and it's a day in the world. We celebrate what a man has done with not only with his own life, but with the life of his children. Everybody wants to be successful. And we all want our children to be even more successful than we are. That's an act of God and timing. So just to say what he's done, produced great children that went on to make their impression on the world, and they are still doing it now that he's gone, Big C. I think most parents in life, we all go through good and bad times. Sometimes it's health, sometimes it's finances, sometimes it's relationships. But we're all going to go through something. Nobody's getting out of this life unscathed. We know that. But for his family, I'm just respect for him, how he raised his children, how he was always motivating them to be the best that they can be. And I think the world will always live on by his children continuing to go forward. I do want to say that sports is a billion-dollar industry, and boys and girls sports is the foundation to this billion-dollar industry. For every athletic and sporting event, you need athletic and event insurance. We work with Ben and Mark. They've been around half a century. They work with Big C Sports. Whether you're a pro team, a collegiate team, a high school team, even your mom and pop soccer leagues, when you reach out to them, let them know that Big C sent you. And so, Big C, I wanna bring up this thought. One more thing on the Jacksons, because I think when you think about sports connecting the people all over the world and music connecting the people all over the world, every sporting event, you notice how they pump music through the audience, Big C? Before, during, and after a game, they're always pumping music through the audience. And I know when we lost the late Michael Jackson, there was always, people were lying, they were acting as if he was one of their own siblings. They were so fallen by it. Again, that's because of Joe Jackson and Catherine Jackson raising that kind of family. And I just want to get your thoughts on how sports taken music and made it part of the game itself. Big C, your thoughts.
Justin, every game, there's certain theme songs that have come out over the years, Charlton, that are piped through the arenas that, electrify the crowd to get them motivated. These symbols of Americana, and many of them were written by minority writers, Charlton, when you look at it. But, when we think about sports and you think about entertainment, halftime at most sporting events where basketball, basketball and football have some sort of entertainment involved, Charlton.
Yeah.
A lot of pregame. You're getting all that music right through the system, Charlton, of the top artists on the chart to pump up the crowd.
Yeah.
So when we look at how sports and the entertainment industry are interwoven with each other, Charlton, you think about the number of athletes that have been on sporting shows, Charlton.
Yes.
And number of singers that want to hang out with actors, Charlton.
Yeah.
That try to play golf with them, try to play basketball with them. None of them want to play football. Not even touch.
No.
But these guys try to interact. We see the NBA All-Star game. Singers come out and try to perform.
Yeah.
Actors try to perform in the NBA All-Star, game that they have every year for those people. But when we look at Michael Jackson, he was an artist that could get anything that he wanted.
Yeah.
And he was such a personable person and a quiet person, Charlton. His main care was about children, Charlton.
Yeah.
Regardless of the accusations that he had against him, and they were all about money, he was never charged criminally. He was always charged in a civil lawsuit,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
Is that if someone's a criminal, why not have him go into criminal prosecution?
Yeah.
Why in a civil lawsuit? It was always amazing.
Yeah. We know that.
When you think about what he did when he did the song "We Are the World," he and Quincy Jones and dozens of other artists after the Grammy Awards, I believe it was somewhere around 1981.
Yeah.
That he got everybody together, and they did this song for world hunger, the famine that was going on. This was inspired by Michael. And think about so many of his songs about children, that the inspiration and the thought that he put into it because he cared so deeply about them.
Yeah.
He had Neverland Ranch that he built, which was an amusement park. And a lot of people said because he didn't have a child. I don't think anybody stops being a child in life, Charlton. They all want to do some youthful things. But he didn't have enough, Charlton. He brought other children in. He brought in sick children, children that didn't have things. He was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation in America that people didn't know about.
Yeah.
He would always bring these terminally ill children to Neverland. Let them fulfill a fantasy part of life, Charlton, that they saw on television. They could have it at Michael's place. Not in front of the TV cameras, Charlton, in isolation at his place with their family, and they could have the time of their lives. He was a great humanitarian.
Yeah.
But the media didn't want to always hear that side about him, Charlton. Just like with athletes, the media is not interested in the humanitarian side of these athletes that they're talking about going to be free agents. That's all we hear. Free agent, where's he going? Free agent, where's he going? What's the move going to be, And I'm so burnt out on that. It's like, where's the story in the story that you're telling?
Yeah.
That's where our media is. And it got that way with the negativity about Mike during his lifetime, and even his dad, Joe.
Yeah.
The negativity because you didn't know about these people is like, let me make something up. And hopefully everybody else will start saying the same thing.
I'll tell you what, Big C, it's something when you know the family's hurting, but I'm sure they're also very proud of what they became. I do want to touch on a little bit of sports, Big C. Lionel Messi in the World Cup, and finally, celebrates his 65th career goal with Argentina, his first of the World Cup. It was on Tuesday in the win over Nigeria in St. Petersburg, Russia. So he was having a tough time, but now he's finally getting back on track. But also even more when you go back in the history of the days of great performances on this day 30 years ago. It was the great Michael Spinks. He had pleasure of being knocked out by Mike Tyson. Bixie, what a pleasure when you get knocked out by a guy that knocks everybody out in the first round or two. Talk about how honored that is to be one of those guys. One of those guys, Bixie, you thought.
Well, ironically, Chuck, 30 years ago prior to that fight, I had the privilege of Mike being by the house, Mike Spinks. And we talked. He was hanging out and he was training. And he said, I can't beat him. He said, but I'm no fool either.
Yes.
I'm not going to let him hurt me. Now, Mike received between $10 and $14 million for that fight.
Yes.
And I call Mike one of the most intelligent fighters in the history of the world, as you want to say.
Yeah.
Because he had made a couple of defenses of his world title. So he had some money in the bank.
Yeah.
This money that he received from that fight, Charlton, was $14 million. He knew at that point he didn't have to work anymore. He was an intelligent man.
Yeah.
Because he said, I'm not going to let him hurt me. And the minute he hits me too hard, I'm going down.
Yes.
And he caught him with a roof shot.
Yeah.
He went down to a knee, and he thought about it at that point. He said, okay, do I want to take any more punishment? He said, well, we've only gone 1 minute. Let me stand up. I'm going to let him hit me hard one more time.
Yeah.
And that's going to be it.
Yeah.
They can have a guy here sweeping up the arena. I'll still be laying down here on the canvas. I'm not getting up.
Yeah.
There's not even a reason for the officials to start the count.
Yeah.
Because I'm not moving.
Yeah.
And so Mike caught him, and he went down.
Yeah.
But, I praise Mike for what he did, Charlton. He retired after that fight. He wasn't one of those guys who kept hanging on. We talk about the great Ali, where the boxing commission should have stopped him from fighting 3 years before they did, Charlton.
Yeah.
I look at many other fighters who've been around too long, even Thomas Hearns, out there fighting too long when he didn't have anything. Larry Holmes trying to make a comeback against Mike Tyson. There's certain guys that you don't do it because you love people and you say, wow, he was so great.
Yes.
We got to give him a chance. No, you don't. There's no chance when there's not a chance. When you go to a gunfight with a knife, you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it was like fighting Mike Tyson when he was young.
Yeah.
You were going to a gunfight with a knife in your hand.
Yeah.
Then I might get one slice in at you. Okay?
Yeah.
Mike wouldn't even let you get close. He beat you with them sledgehammers. But, Mike Spinks 30 years ago, and, like I said, I had the privilege of talking with him prior to the fight, while he was training.
Yes.
But it just lets you know the greatness of a Mike Tyson at the time.
Yeah.
Mike Spinks had won the title from Larry Holmes, taking it away from him. No one thought he could beat him. But he became the world champion, Charlton.
Yeah.
And even in the short time that he did it with class. You never heard anything negative about Mike Spinks, Charlton, prior to winning the world title after being a light heavyweight champion in the 88 Olympics, Charlton.
Yes.
Not the 88, 84 Olympics in Los Angeles. Going on, becoming a solid professional heavyweight.
Yeah.
Winning the title, Charlton. And even after he retired, he was more respected after he retired because you never heard anything from him.
Yeah.
No one even knows what he does today, Charlton, because he wanted anonymity.
Yes.
He made enough money to support him and his family the rest of his life, and he went back and enjoyed himself.
Yeah.
I want professional athletes, when their time comes, Charlton, would do that. And stop thinking that you're better than the young guys that come up.
That's
you may
true.
have been at one point in your career.
Yeah.
But now you're 10 years on these guys. You're not any longer.
Yeah.
As athletes, we fade. And the toughest thing to recognize as an athlete is that you no longer have the physical capabilities of a guy 10 years younger than you.
Yep, I think that's what a lot of guys. That's the young lion and the old lion, and the old lion's trying to do what the young lion's doing, but nature knew what it was doing, I guess. Some people got to talk to nature about that. Also, speaking of the young lions and going back to the World Cup, over in your friend Putin, Big C, Germany was knocked off by Korea today, South Korea, and that's last year's defending World Cup champion. So everything is designed to come and go, and so we wish them nothing but the best over there in the World Cup. Big C, when you look at Major League Baseball, and strikeouts are outweighing hits this season, future of baseball, when they say girls love the long ball. I remember back in the day watching Barry Bonds and McGuire and Canseco and everybody associated with hitting home runs, and people loved it. It made baseball exciting. We look at Stanton right now when he's coming up hitting the ball, and Pujols when he can hit the ball out of the ballpark. But right now, when you look at strikeouts, they're outweighing the hits this season. Is that good or is that bad for baseball? People want to see the long ball, Big C.
Well, Charlton, I honestly think it's bad for baseball. You think about it. Right now, we're a third of the way through the baseball season. The number one thing that's being talked about right now is the World Cup. Think about that.
Yeah.
Baseball is America's pastime, or was America's pastime.
Yeah.
The World Cup right now has more interest, even in America, than what baseball does. Baseball is lacking some oomph right now, Charlton. You want to go back to the home run races in baseball when McGuire and Sosa were battling each other back-to-back seasons, hitting 60-plus home runs. When Barry Bonds was pushing the limit of the long ball in baseball, there was nothing but a heightened of excitement in baseball when you had the Bash Brothers in Oakland, Charlton.
Yep.
Everybody talked about the big hitters. That's what they were. The big hitters, whether they were in Baltimore, whether they were in Oakland, whether they were in San Francisco, whether they were in Texas or Chicago, New York, Charlton, the big hitters in baseball brought the fans to the ballpark.
Yeah.
I mean, we love to see a pitcher go out there and throw a no-hitter. But what does a no-hitter mean to a fan? Is that I sit there and watch nobody get a hit.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's what it means.
Yeah.
I mean, in America, we look at sports as scoring events.
Yes.
That's how we gauge sports. How much did you score? You go to an NFL game, and that game ends up 6-3, all you're doing is complaining.
Yeah.
You're complaining about the quarterback's a bum, the receivers can't catch, and the running back can't run.
Yeah.
You're not talking about how great that defensive line was, or those linebackers played, or how those DBs shut down those receivers.
Yes.
You don't talk about that. You talk about how pathetic the offense. We just saw the NBA Finals, Charlton.
Yes.
Everybody was talking about the Golden State Warriors offense, that you can't outscore. No one talked about how great their defense was, that they were holding their opponents in their losses under 90 points.
Yeah.
Throughout the playoffs, Charlton. Regardless who they played, they held their opponents on an average of 90 points through their championship run.
Yeah, they were excellent.
Everybody talked about how many points they scored.
Yeah.
Think about that. Nobody wants to go out and see an NBA game, Charlton, where both teams are in the 80s.
Yeah.
They will boo you out of the stadium at that point.
Yeah.
So, this is what we're looking at with baseball right now, is that the strikeouts are hurting the game.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's players are trying to overswing and hit the long ball, or just the pitchers are painting the better, or the umpires is like, I'm tired of sitting down and crouch
It's
all
hard
night
to
long.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, but, from a fan's perspective,
yeah,
they want to see runs.
Yes.
That's what what does the baseball fraternity do during the Star break, Charlton? They have this little contest called what?
Drinking
home
beer?
run derby.
Oh, home run derby. Okay, I thought you was like beer drinking.
They don't have the base stealing derby.
No.
Strikeout derby.
Right.
They have the home run derby because they know that's what fans want to see.
Yeah, they definitely want to see it.
But they've taken the long ball out of the game now, and strikeouts are the king.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the all-time strikeout leaders, Charlton, they never won a World Series.
That's true.
Think about that. Nolan Ryan didn't win a World Series.
Nope.
Randy Johnson didn't win a World Series. So just because you can strike people out didn't mean that you could hit the long ball.
No, it sure did.
The long ball will put butts in the seats, Charles.
That's true. Butts in the seats always matter, especially when you're trying to build the Lakers' final story, Big C. There are people who don't understand Magic Johnson's history, and there are people saying Magic Johnson on the hot seat. Magic Johnson is considered an All-American in high school. We know what he did back in the day at Michigan State, taking them to a national championship. Went to 9 NBA finals, became a 5-time world champion, and played against some of the greatest players in the era of his time dominating. You know, he at the end of his career, he played against the great Magic Johnson, played against Larry Bird, Dr. J, a lot of good old boys, and still was able to play with Kareem and play with Byron. I mean, Kareem and Worthy, those Hall of Fame guys. He's not in any trouble with the Lakers. He said if he doesn't get somebody big in 2 years, he'll step down. That's because he's busy. To me, that's a way of saying, if you guys won't listen to me, then I don't want to be here. Your thoughts in the last minutes?
Well, Charlton, I mean, you got to want to play with an organization. And as great as the Lakers have been in past years, you got to also understand it's not Magic that changed the dynamics of the Western Division. Other teams did that while the Lakers were sitting there fighting with each other as a family. You know, Jeannie and Jerry Buss Jr., they're sitting there fighting with each other. Other teams captured the scene.
Yeah.
You had the Warriors say, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Why
what the Lakers used to do.
Yes.
You had the Rockets doing the same thing, gathering talent.
Yep.
You've seen the other young teams. I mean, when you look at the West, Charlton, the West is a juggernaut right now. Everybody talks about Golden State, Houston. Portland is no slouch.
No.
Utah is no slouch. New Orleans is no slouch, Charlton. When you look at that Western Conference, there are teams up and down the list, Charlton, that are solid and will be solid.
Yeah.
So to bring free agents into Los Angeles, you're not going to win next year, Charlton. You're not, because it's going to take at least a year, guys, to get together on the same page. And you have to face these good teams all the time in the conference, not just twice a season.
Yes.
So, LeBron, everybody talked about Houston. You got to eat basketballs if you go to Houston. Period. Harden's not giving the ball up. That's why he left OKC, because he couldn't have the ball more.
Yes.
You had Westbrook, you had Durant, and you had Harden on the same team. And so he went to Houston, and even with Chris Paul there, he still wouldn't give up the ball.
Yeah.
So it goes to L.A., and I don't, like you said, I don't know if there's pressure on Magic.
No.
How do you put pressure on an individual?
He's already wealthy.
Because it's not even about the wealth, Charlton. He's been successful. He's been successful in the game of basketball as a player. He wasn't successful as a coach. We all know he had a short run there with the Lakers. And now they're saying because of his image and name, that should automatically draw players to him. I remember when Magic signed the largest contract back in the early 80s in the history of basketball. Had everybody mad, okay?
$1 million a year.
He signed a 25-year, $25 million contract.
Yeah.
Okay, the max money that LeBron could get this year would be $36 million if he stays in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Okay, $25 million. The New York Nets, the New Jersey Nets, just paid Dwight Howard $20 million to buy out of his contract.
Wow.
You know what he turned around and did, Charlton?
What's that?
He just signed with the Golden State Warriors. Okay?
Yeah.
He just signed with the Golden State Warriors. So when you're talking about building the super team, who just got really strong in the West?
Yeah.
Okay? You just brought in a guy who averaged 17 points and 12 rebounds a game last year. You actually, in the history of your 4 consecutive championship run, Charlton, this is the first time you have a legitimate center.
Yeah, I tell you.
Think about that. They have a legitimate center now in Golden State. So what team in the Western Conference is really going to affect them? Nobody, Charlton. So if I'm LeBron and I want to win, I'm not going to win with L.A. Lakers' best choice right now, Charlton, is to package up 2 players and a draft pick, send them to San Antonio for Kawhi Leonard.
Yes.
2 players, just tell them to whoever you want off our roster you're going to have. Do that. You had a losing team anyway. So you're not trading any winners. Think about that. You're not trading any winners.
I tell you.
10 players and a draft pick to San Antonio, get Kawhi Leonard, Mel George come over, Charlton, and build with those two.
It must be the Vibranium California, because when you get Superman, even Superman is coming to California, Big C. I would tell you, when you look at Golden State and what they're doing, they're not resting on their laurels. And we know that in order to win a championship, you got to surround yourself with championship pedigree. Also, in getting Dwight Howard, I want to call him Superman, Big C. He's too big for Dwight Howard. He doesn't have to be the guy this time. He doesn't have to be the guy that he went to the Lakers to be the number 2 guy with Kobe. He can be the guy that they use off the bench as a center. Okay, he doesn't have to be the dominant guy. That's the biggest thing about bringing Howard, and that's what we'll see. Superman is in the house. He must be also eating vibranium with those shoulders, Big C. Back in the day, there was a man named Bundini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man. Always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little disgruntled. Now that we don't have a lot of major sports being played, we have the mothership lacking in content, Charlton, because all of his broadcasters are recycling what they talk about just on a different show.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's recycling all day long. Then all of a sudden, for content, they're going out putting on this thing called the cornhole contest.
What?
And I'm looking at that. I'm like, are Americans that desperate that they're going to sit up and watch people throw a beanbag in a hole that's whatever feet away from it, 20, 30 feet away? Is that competition, Charlton?
Wow.
I'm confused. Here it is. During the football season, we have historical black colleges that ESPN basically refuses to show on television.
Yeah.
And they will show high school football games, Charlton. But historical black colleges have been the fabric of the NFL's history.
The swag and
when you look at the Hall of Fame and see how many black players came from these historical black colleges that have a bust in Kent, and ESPN will not respect the historical black colleges, but they put more emphasis on mainstream out there throwing a beanbag into a hole that's 20 feet away while holding a beer, Charlton.
I tell you, it's all fair love and war, and people do what they want. I do want to say to the late Joe Jackson, what a great life lived, produced a great family, and I know his family is going through their mourning, but there's a lot of people that his lives have been made better just because of such great music. Speaking of great music, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. We always tell you there's never, ever any excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please call 911 so no one has to go through that on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.